Attorney and Huffington Post blogger Tanya Acker joins me now. Tanya, great to see you.
Nice
Certainly
to see you,
a big day tomorrow, but the timeline I just mentioned, it could go out the window if the defense gets its way. They want the trial delayed. Do you think this is a tactic, or are they thinking to themselves, we don't have enough time to move forward here?
Look, this is not a terribly complicated case, Susan. We're not talking about a situation where there are lots and lots of witnesses who need to be interviewed or documents that need to be reviewed. It simply isn't that type of case. I do think it's a defense tactic. And by the way, I don't fault these defense lawyers. They are doing their job, which is to try to protect their client. But the strategy here really is to put this trial, to put the fact-finding off as long as possible so that we can really change, so that they can change the image of who Trayvon Martin is.
Yeah.
And you remember when this first happened, this was about an unarmed kid with Skittles, and now we're talking about gold teeth and pot smoking and a history that, by the way, George Zimmerman had no knowledge of when he pursued Trayvon Martin that evening. It's very important for... Sorry, go ahead.
It seems as though the judge runs a tight ship, though, and may not allow this tactic, if that's what they're doing, to delay the trial.
This judge has shown every indication that he does not want the trial to play in the sort of media circus that often happens in these sorts of high-profile cases. He does seem to be running a tight ship, but again, who knows where he'll go with this ruling? Who knows if the defendants are going to say, and again, George Zimmerman has the constitutional right to put on as aggressive defense as he can, and these lawyers may say that they just don't have enough time, but frankly, I don't really see with what's before us, with what this case really involves, why it would really need to be delayed much further.
And a big part of this case is what is relevant. The defense says Trayvon Martin exchanged angry text messages the day he was killed. What are the chances, Tanya, that you think a jury will see those texts, and how relevant do you think they are to that actual day?
Well, so the legal standard for determining whether or not that stuff should come in, Susan, is whether or not the probative value outweighs the prejudice. Is this evidence going to tell us something about this incident that may, give us more information about what really happened? And again, it's a very clever defense tactic, because what happened here, the facts that we know, we don't know who said what. Trayvon Martin is dead. But what we do know is that George Zimmerman was following a 17-year-old teenage boy when the police told him to go home. He continued to follow him. He continued to pursue him. And Trayvon Martin was running away. Now, to the extent that the defense argues, as they intend to, that the fact that Trayvon Martin may have smoked pot, look, I know of a lot of 17-year-old pot-smoking kids, and I'm not really sure that that becomes relevant in terms of whether or not they should be chased and then subsequently shot down. And so, again, this is also evidence. The really important thing to remember here is that what was Trayvon Martin doing when George Zimmerman found him? He wasn't trespassing. He wasn't committing a crime. He simply looked suspicious. George Zimmerman did not have access to text messages, to anger, to any of that information.
Tanya, stay with us. We have much more coming up. The defense wants to use Trayvon Martin's text about fighting, drugs, and guns as evidence. Attorney and Huffington Post blogger Tanya Acker is back with me. A lot to talk about, Tanya. What do you think when you look at those pictures and you see the texts? Do you think the judge will allow that into evidence? How are you leaning here in terms of what you think will happen?
Gosh, Susan, it's so hard to predict what a judge will do in a case like this, but I certainly do not think that there is a good argument for their admission in the evidence. You ask me what I see when I see those pictures. I see a teenage boy, like a lot of teenage boys in the United States, who talk about guns, who might be a little aggressive from time to time. I haven't read those texts, but I mean, that's their implication. I know there are lots of teenagers in the United States and others who like to take a hit of pot from time to time. So I'm not seeing anything that really warrants or that really explains the story of what happened that night. And again, this is not information that George Zimmerman had access to when he decided that he needed to ignore the authorities, ignore the real police, and keep following this young man.
Tanya, you mentioned that. Exactly. Sorry to interrupt here, but the 911 operator said to him, "Are you following this man?" He says yes, and the operator says, "I don't think you should be doing that." How damaging do you think that is to the defense when those 911 calls are heard?
I think it's incredibly damaging because, again, let's go back to that night. At the end of the day, regardless of what the defense wants to paint Trayvon Martin as, he's a 17-year-old boy on foot who's being followed by a grown man. Now, there are lots of other ways that story could have played out. We talk a lot on this network about kids who are disappeared, kids who are attacked, or kids who are molested. So now, it's very important for the defense. They really need to change the subject. They need to make Trayvon Martin a kid who did not have the right to be left alone, like the rest of us do, who somehow was somehow inherently suspect. They need to make him inherently suspect so that they can sell this story that this young man did not have the right, a guy who was not trespassing, not breaking the law. He may have been staring out into space. I know lots of folks who sometimes take walks and stare out into space. They really need to change the subject. And that's what I think the strategy is trying to affect.
And quickly here, what do you think the prosecution strategy will be? We haven't heard much from them in terms of what they're basing this on. What do you think will happen in terms of the prosecution?
Susan, I think they're going to focus on that tape. They're going to focus on the fact that Trayvon Martin was trying to get away from Zimmerman. They're going to focus on the fact that the police told Zimmerman to stop. They told him to go home. His lawyers are suggesting that Trayvon Martin should have acted differently, but they're going to say that Zimmerman did not do as he was ordered to by the police.
Tanya, thanks so much. I'm sure we're going to talk a lot during this case. Appreciate your insight on this. Thanks.
Thanks, Susan.